Hello, welcome to St Michael's Hill. In today's video I'm going to be working on the fiddle yard. In the May update I showed you that the board had been kind of created and was just being prepared for track and all that sort of stuff. So in this video, firstly I'm going to be laying the track and that will involve weathering it slightly and getting the sleeper spacing done. And then I will be moving on to finding a way to connect the boards together. I'm going to be using a couple of techniques to get the fiddle yard and the layout to be connected but also removable. And then I'm also going to have a quick look at the wiring and try and get it all operational and tested before in part 2, which will probably be next week or the following week, I'll be looking at ballasting, trying some techniques for that, and then also getting some programming track down and trying out some hard standing. So that's what you can expect from this week's video. So the first thing I will do now is basically just set out the track. It's been a slight kind of change in my thoughts. I know when I first kind of introduced this on the update the other week, there was talk of kind of quite an extensive fiddle yard. I've changed my mind on that basically because of cost. Trying to save up for baseboards for the main layout and also all the track work that's going to be on that. It just seems crazy to kind of spend what probably would have ended up being close to £100 on track and point work and all that sort of stuff just for a fiddle yard. So I'm going to keep it at its very, very basic and have basically one point and then basically straight sections of track and hopefully enough room for a head shunt, and that will probably be that for now. And the other thing I will keep was the programming track, so there'll be another straight section of track as well. So I'm going to basically take that out, plan it out, and then I'm going to use the same track bed. So I use this foam, which I'll show you more of in a minute, instead of cork. I'm just going to continue that and get everything in place. Track plan is going to be very similar to this, so one road out of each of the tunnel mouths. It comes down to a point, and then there'll be a head shunt along here. It's just going to allow me to take trains from either side down into the head shunt and out the other end again, which will create some kind of interesting running shots. So that's the plan, to kind of have enough length at this end for a class 60, which I think is my longest loco. I need the point to be about here, which makes things a little bit tight. There's a bit of an angle that needs to kind of be made, but I think generally we'll be all right. So I'm going to cut the track roughly. I'm going to leave a little bit more than I need on all kind of instances, and then I'll be ready to do it. I'm going to cut using some snippers basically. I have looked at Dremels as well. I don't have a Dremel at the moment, so I have a rotary cutter, but I don't know if it's quite up to the job. But I have a couple of Exxon track cutters, so I'll probably just use those. It's a very quick and easy job. So it's quite a simple job really of measuring and then just marking the rail with a little bit of permanent marker. So I've done one there and then on this one. It's just there. I'm just going to cut these up. I've left room to kind of go over the edge here. We can trim these off at the end later, especially on this back one where there's going to be an angle. It's going to be easier just to do that. And then I'm going to start removing some of the sleepers on the section. The ends of the rails will be done using a copper clad sleeper, so I can basically solder them to that piece of cladding that will be fixed to the board to keep everything nice and straight. And again, at this end, it will be done exactly the same way. With the leftover wooden sleeper track, I will make a programming track at the back here, so I'll be able to kind of program all my locos on here if I'm away from home or whatever. Just means that I'll always have that option, so that'll be done. And then I'm going to, like I said, try some different techniques on weathering and things like that. So the first job will be cut them up, start spacing the sleepers, and then I'm going to be giving the paint track a good paint, get it all fixed down, and then start weathering it after the ballasting has also been done. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I've marked out where the track needs to be cut. As you can see, there's little permanent marker lines on the rails themselves. Same here on the back ones. I'm going to try and use this rotary tool, similar to a Dremel, but it's not. So I'll give that a go. If that doesn't work, then I will use a pair of track cutters that I've got. So I'm going to give that a go now, and hopefully that works first time. When it comes to the underlay, I'm not going to be using cork, as lots of people do, just because I didn't on the main layout. So I just want to keep things consistent. So I'll be using this Woodland Scenics track bed. It's kind of basically a black or dark grey foam. It's very easy to work with. You'd basically exactly in the same way cut strips as if you were working with cork, and just work around it, and then just cut it with a knife. So I'll be using that. It's very, very easy. So I'm going to cut strips for the straight pieces of track, and a slightly different one for the points. And then in case of turning it, it's exactly the same. So you just you can cut grooves in it to turn corners. So I'm going to get that all cut up now, and I'll be back with you. So as with cork, you basically want to do something like this. Leave a little bit of an edge so you can create that ballast shoulder, and basically just take a knife and cut down the side and make sure it's fairly nicely done. So I might be able to fit another, so I could probably get 2 lots out of this one and get them all cut up. And then for the points, it's just a case of laying the point down and then basically kind of cutting around the whole thing. Makes it nice and easy. It's easy to drill through, easy to work with, and it's a good product. The only thing is, I think it's slightly more expensive than cork, so when I come to doing the big layout, it's going to be a case of basically using cork to save some money. I'll repeat the process further down the line. I just want to get the front pieces kind of in and ready, so it's very simple to use. So on this fiddle yard, the important thing is really the head shunt and the points. So the points pretty much have to be here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the track bed in place here, just using some wood glue, and then basically build off around it. I'm sure we can get the 2 sections to link up there, and then it's just a case of finding the right angles for the rest of it. But this is pretty much where the points need to go. So I'm going to glue that down first, and then and go from there. Simple kind of bit of wood glue, no kind of massive deal. So basically just glue up the underside and slop it down. When it comes to the track, I'll probably use Copydex or something, but for this, to adhere to the wood, it's probably best to just use some good old wood glue. While the glue's drying, I've just weighted it down. Stuff has a tendency, when the glue's very wet, to kind of just slide around a little bit. So it's just a case of getting it all lined up and weighed down. From here, I will obviously get the lengths correctly positioned for that, and then I'll start to work on the track. So let's talk about track. As lots of you know, some of you don't, 00 track is not the correct scale or indeed gauge to run in scale with 00 locomotives. So as far as I know, 00 locomotives are 1 in 76 scale, but run on a track that is 1 in 87 scale, which is HO. So something that you can do to make track look a lot better is respace the sleepers to give a slightly more prototypical look. When it's done well, it can really make a difference, and it's what I've done on the layout here to kind of varying degrees of success. So in this area, for example, I think it looks pretty damn good. The spacing is fairly good, fairly even, but it certainly gives a nice kind of more realistic appearance. If we have a look at some kind of straight out of the box track, you can see there it's quite a difference. In fact, this is probably more a fairer comparison. This is how it came out of the box, and that is what we're looking like there. So it looks a fair bit better. So the question is how far to space them. It looks as though these Hornby concrete sleepers are about 4.5mm apart, and generally it's kind of seen that 5.5 is probably about right. So it's just a case of spreading them out a little bit. And the way to do this is fairly simple, just it's very time consuming. It's just about cutting the webbing between the sleepers. If you're going to do a proper job, completely cut it out. If not, just cut the line so it's a bit more like this one, and then it just allows you to kind of get the sleeper spacing a little bit more prototypical. So that's what I'm going to do for this fiddle yard, and then all the scenic sections on the new layout, just to try and get a bit more consistency. And then it's just simply a case of gluing each of the sleepers down individually, or in small groups, to make sure that the spacing is right on the final product. To help a little bit with the sleeper spacing, I've just made a simple jig out of balsa wood. So the pieces are 5.5mm across, and then there's obviously a gap big enough for a sleeper inside. So it's just going to hopefully help me just to get everything kind of in place. If we're going to be doing this a lot on the new layout, I thought it'd be a good idea to just get a little jig made up to make my life a little bit easier. So now I've prepared the track by removing the sleepers, the webbing between the sleepers. I'm going to give it a quick layer of paint before I even lay it. So the plan is to give the concrete sleepers a quick going over with some Halford's grey primer, and then for the wooden based track I'm going to try out this camouflage brown, hopefully just to kind of lighten up a little bit, and then it will also allow other paint to kind of be taken a little bit easier. Once that's done, the plan is to then paint the rails in a kind of a rusty kind of colour, and from there I'll be ready to lay the track before I then ballast and then weather that again. So it's kind of a double ballasting, double weathering technique, where we weather the track first, then ballast it, and then weather the track and the ballast together. So I'm going to do that now. So the track's all painted up now. I'm fairly happy with how it looks. It's going to be all weathered again anyway, so I don't want to kind of say it looks great now and then it's all going to change anyway. So I'm quite happy with how it looks. We're happy to move on to the next stage. In preparation for it being glued down, I've soldered a dropper wire on each end at kind of a 90-degree angle, so that's going to go straight down through the board. The other thing I've done is I've just put a piece of copper clad on here as well, so once it's all been glued in place, I'll then solder up the the rails directly to the copper clad sleeper. I've cut a channel out in the middle so no current can pass between the two sides, and short out the circuit. So once this piece is in place, I just need to drill a couple of holes here. I've started them, but just need to finish them off for the dropper wires. Once that's in place, I will then put some glue down. I'll probably use Copydex. Once that's in place, I'll use the jig I've made just to kind of get the sleepers about right, and then make any adjustments I need to by hand, and then it'll be onto ballasting. Obviously, I need to do something similar on all the other sections of track, so I won't ballast until everything is laid track-wise, but just want to get this piece down. There's obviously going to be 4 separate pieces of track, the one that goes from the far tunnel mouth to the point, this one here that we're looking at, the point itself, and then a piece that goes beyond. So I'm going to do the same for all 4 and go from there. The only difference being on the points, I'm not going to respace the sleepers, just because I think it's a bit of a pain. Also, prototypically, the sleepers tend to be a bit closer together on point work anyway. That's what I'm going to do. I'll get back to you once I've made a bit of progress. So the track's now been glued down using copy decks. There are some nails or pins in the sleepers just to kind of help it stay in a particular place, and they'll be removed once the glue's dried. I've also soldered the ends of the track to the copper clad, so that should keep everything kind of in place as much as possible. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is moving on to painting up the points and the other pieces of the track, and get them to a similar state as this, and then I will join you to go through the ballasting. I think I'm fairly pleased with how this has gone together. I'm fairly pleased with how the sleepers are looking. There's just one or two where just need to be slightly adjusted, but generally I'm quite happy with the spacing. I think 5.5 mil seems to be a good kind of spacing on the sleepers. It seems to look quite realistic, and hopefully once it's ballasted will continue to look that way. So yeah, pleased with that. The only place where it's not obviously is as it gets a bit closer to the points, but that's fine. That's to be expected anyway. I may end up sliding another sleeper between here, but potentially not. Depends on how it looks after it's all dry and ready to go. But yeah, I'll be back once all the track's in a similar position. So now the track is all down. It's all been kind of glued. It's not been wired up yet, although droppers have obviously been soldered to the bottom and run through the track. The next step before I ballast though is going to be wait for this to dry, probably overnight, and then I'll flip the board over entirely and wire it all up, and then ensure that it's working correctly. Another area that I'm experimenting with a little bit is rail joiners. So the points on this end, I have obviously the insulated joiners on the point by Frog, and then I'm using standard fish plate rail joiners here. This other end I've not used any at all, so I'm just hoping that the rails being fixed in place is going to hold that. So that's probably what I would like to do on the new layout, and then if I need to I can fit cosmetic ones, but I will see how that goes, see what the reliability of it's like. The other thing is it does allow just little gaps in there if there is any expansion due to heat. So as you can see, it's now all been wired to the bus wire, or the droppers have been wired to the bus wire. I've just spliced them directly on and then heat shrink them. I will run some insulation tape around the join as well, just to protect the dropper wire where it's coming in, but generally very happy with kind of how that's going. I've installed a little block there just to put the the bus wire in at the end, just to keep it safe. It kind of just runs up, and then the same at this end, and then I'm left with a couple of lengths of bus wire that are going to be able to be attached to the main layout. So hopefully that will all run smoothly. I'm going to get it all connected and then test it out and see what happens. And I'll join you, or you can join me again when that's about to be done. So then it's the moment of truth. I thought about testing the class 60, although I've realised that it's been programmed for a log address above 10 or above 9, so the background controller isn't going to be able to handle that. I've literally just wired up the fiddle yard to the controller for now. I just want to make sure that's all working before I wire it in to the same kind of power as the main layout. So let's see how it goes. I'm obviously a little bit worried with the points obviously not being electrified on the Frog, so potentially we might struggle. I think if anything is going to struggle, it's this class 08, so let's give it a go, see if it can run across the points. So here we go. Seems to have worked surprisingly well. Running it back across the points the other direction now. great. Happy with that. I'll do a bit more testing with other locos, just make sure everything kind of runs across and it works, and then I will try wiring it up to the main layout, and then once that's done and I'm happy, I'm going to move on to ballasting, and we'll go from there. So when it comes to joining the boards, I'm going to take a two kind of pronged approach. The first of which is these aligning dowels. So the hole will be drilled in each of the boards, and these will be placed in. So I'll probably put this one on the fiddle yard and use this smaller one on the main layout, and obviously they just kind of slide in, so it's kind of a perfect fit. Put it right around, so they just slide in. Having two of those is going to kind of mean the alignment of the boards is always sound. And then to create the kind of tension to pull everything together, I'm going to use these clamps. They are right angle ones, so they're designed to be kind of placed around the corner here. As you can see, the boards aren't the same width, so we're going to have one that comes around the corner and pulls everything together nicely. So hopefully that'll provide enough strength. Obviously, when it's supported from below by trestles or something like that, to kind of keep everything exactly where it should be the whole time, to allow trains to run directly from one board to the other. So that is the plan. I'm going to get working on that, and I'll be back when it's done. In terms of the electronic connection, I'm going to use a block that has a connection, so I'll be able to just push them together, and the wiring will be instantly kind of removable. So it should be a case of just unhooking these clips, unhooking the wiring, and just pulling the boards apart. Fingers crossed it all works. I'm just going to get that fitted, and I'll show you once it's done. So I've now attached the fiddle yard to the main layout, using two of these toggle clips, so one on each side, and then there's two aligning dowels underneath. They're quite thick, as you saw before. I think they're at 9.5mm, and they're pretty brutal to get in, so you have to drill a big hole with a massive drill bit and then hammer them in, and it's pretty brutal. So I'm quite glad that the layout and the fiddle yard survived that, to be honest. I was a little bit worried at one point, but it's all gone on quite nicely, and it's very strong indeed. Just with these two clips and the aligning dowels, actually it's supporting its own weight past that point, so as you can see, it's literally held up by the tension in these clips. So that's very encouraging. The other thing which is quite nice is that just through the tension and the connection between the rails, there seems to be enough current to actually run a loco through the fiddle yard. Obviously I will connect it up so it gives a more reliable connection, but actually straight out of the bat it seems to be running pretty well across the fiddle yard, which is very encouraging indeed. Obviously with a class 60 there is not much room on the end here, but I can get it all stopped and get the points switched. Yeah, loco obviously also runs back out this way and back out onto the layout. So yeah, this is the first time that this has been possible. And, I think it's pretty impressive that the connection will do that as it is. So very, very pleased with how that's gone. So I think that's probably a good place to leave it for today. I'm just going to leave you with a couple of running shots, but I'll be back soon with part 2 of this video that will be in a week or two, that will look at ballasting and some new techniques that I'm going to try for that. So thank you very much for joining me today on St Michael's Hill, and I'll see you again very soon indeed. Cheers, bye-bye. If you like this video, there's another video from me in the top left-hand corner of this page. This week's channel shout-out goes to Matty Midland1, whose Gotham layout is stunning. Check it out by clicking the icon in the bottom right-hand corner of this page, and don't forget to subscribe to his channel. Thanks very much. See you again soon. Bye-bye.